Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Shauna Nelson. Heather Hodges and Ignacio Gose met at a university party while studying at the University of Northern Colorado. It was instant attraction, with Ignacio's friendly nature and great personality drawing Heather in right away. They both felt an undeniable spark of love at first sight. Heather had a lively and fun personality combined with a touch of innocence. Her stunning physical appearance didn't go unnoticed, with her pale skin, red lips, and dark hair captivating Ignacio. He affectionately nicknamed her his Snow White. When Ignacio asked Heather out on their first date, she was thrilled and eagerly shared the news with her roommates, who were over the moon for her. Heather's friends were delighted for her, as she hadn't had much experience with dating, and they believed this date could be the start of something truly special. As Heather and Ignacio's relationship blossomed, it quickly evolved into a more serious commitment. Ignacio was devoted, constantly surprising Heather with her favorite flowers and coffee. His thoughtful gestures made Heather feel loved, appreciated, and valued. After graduating from the University of Northern Colorado, Ignacio took their relationship to the next level by proposing to Heather, and she happily accepted his proposal. Heather and Ignacio got engaged, but Heather made it clear that if Ignacio ever cheated on her, she would end the marriage immediately, no matter how sorry he was or how hard he tried to make things right. This was non-negotiable for her, and she would not tolerate infidelity in their relationship. A year after getting engaged, they got married in a beautiful ceremony. Ignacio became a police officer at the Gray, Colorado Police Department, while Heather worked as a supervisor at the local credit union. Her co-workers and customers loved her because she was so good at comforting people during tough times. One of her colleagues even said she was wonderful in every way. 5 years after getting married, Heather and Ignacio decided to start a family. Soon, Heather gave birth to a beautiful baby girl named Victoria. Being a mom filled Heather with joy, and her whole world revolved around her new daughter. Ignacio was a great dad too. From the outside, it seemed like they had the perfect life. Heather's father died of a heart attack in 1997, and soon after, her mother was diagnosed with cancer, which was even more devastating. To care for her mother, Heather dedicated herself to providing support and care for several years until her mother's passing in 2003. During this time, Ignacio was a loving and supportive husband and father, taking on more responsibilities to care for their daughter Victoria and help with household chores. However, after months of supporting Heather through her grief, Ignacio began to develop feelings for his coworker, Shauna Nelson, a dispatcher at the Gray Police Department, who was married to Ken, a deputy at the Wells County Sheriff's Office. Shauna's marriage was struggling, and she and Ignacio started as friends, but eventually developed a romantic relationship. They began flirting and teasing each other, and Shauna's compliments caught Ignacio's attention, captivating him. As they spent more time together, their connection deepened, and their feelings shifted from playful flirtation to intense passion and intimacy. Shauna and Ignacio's romantic relationship grew stronger, fueling local gossip, but Ignacio's wife Heather remained clueless about his infidelity. Despite everyone in their social circle being aware of the situation, no one dared to inform Heather. As a result, Shauna and Ignacio's affair continued to thrive, with Heather still unaware of her husband's deception. When Shauna discovered she was pregnant, she eagerly shared the news with Ignacio. However, he didn't take the news well and started questioning whether the baby was actually his son or Ken, who's Shauna's husband. Shauna assured him that Ken had undergone a vasectomy after their second child, ruling out the possibility of Ken being the father. Appreciating the dire consequences Heather would face if she found out about the pregnancy, Ignacio became anxious. He didn't want the baby and desperately sought a solution with Shauna's consent. He convinced her to terminate the pregnancy and drove her to the clinic. Months and years went by, with Heather still unaware of her husband's affair with Shauna. However, as time passed, Shauna grew impatient and decided to confront Heather. One day, she followed Heather to the grocery store, accompanied by her friend Michelle Moore. Shauna and Michelle discreetly followed Heather around the store, observing her every move. Heather, still oblivious to their presence, engaged in a phone conversation with a friend. Shauna confronted Heather in a store, insulting and accusing her in a vicious outburst. The verbal attack left Heather deeply disturbed. Recognizing Shauna from her husband Ignacio's work Christmas parties, Heather decided to talk to him about the incident, as she knew Shauna was his co-worker at the police department. Heather asked Ignacio why Shauna, who had always been friendly, would suddenly lash out at her. Ignacio explained that Shauna had romantic feelings for him, but assured Heather she had nothing to worry about. He promised to tell Shauna to leave Heather alone, and he did confront her, but Shauna became furious with him. Despite this, Shauna continued to harass Heather. One time, Shauna showed up at Heather and Ignacio's home, demanding to see Ignacio. Heather couldn't shake the feeling that there might be more to her husband's relationship with Shauna than she knew. Shauna confided in a supervisor at the county dispatch center about her affair with Ignacio, revealing her deep feelings for him and stating that she loved him more than anyone else she had ever met. However, Shauna expressed frustration that Ignacio's wife, Heather, was an obstacle to their relationship. According to the supervisor, Shauna revealed that she would visit the shooting range to vent her frustrations, where she would imagine the targets were Heather. Although Shauna and Ignacio had been having an affair for years, Ken, Shauna's husband, remained unaware of the situation until he stumbled upon Shauna's journal, which detailed her relationship with Ignacio. Despite his discovery, Ken chose not to leave Shauna, opting instead to stay together for the sake of their children. Ignacio was involved with multiple women, including Shauna, who was aware of his relationship with another woman. This knowledge drove Shauna to be possessive and controlling, determined to remain the primary woman in his life. She blackmailingly threatened to reveal everything to Heather if he ever considered leaving her. Shauna's fixation on Ignacio intensified, and in July 2005, she took a drastic step to cement her position in his life by getting a tattoo of his family name on her leg. Shauna's fixation on Ignacio had become unhealthy and eventually turned into stalking. Whenever Ignacio went to a restaurant with his partner Heather and their daughter Victoria, Shauna would deliberately show up with her own family. Ignacio found Shauna's behavior increasingly disturbing, yet he continued his affair with her despite this. Shauna discovered she was pregnant with Ignacio's baby for the second time. She informed him that she had no intention of terminating the pregnancy, as she wanted to keep the baby. In March 2006, Shauna gave birth to a son, Christian, who was fathered by Ignacio. At the time, Shauna was still married to Ken, and Ignacio's wife, Heather, was unaware that he had a child with his coworker. In the summer of 2006, Ken offered to raise Christian as his own, on the condition that Shauna would remain married to him, and she accepted this proposal. Heather was blindsided when a woman approached her with devastating news. Shauna Nelson had given birth to Oso's baby. This revelation left Heather stunned and confused. When she returned home, she confronted Ignacio about the child, demanding the truth. However, Ignacio lied to her, covering up his affair with Shauna, and Heather chose to believe him. In December 2006, Heather discovered Ignacio was missing one night. When he finally returned, she confronted him again. This time, Ignacio decided to come clean, revealing he had been with Shauna that night and confessing to a long-term affair. He also disclosed that Shauna had been pregnant twice, resulting in the recent birth of his son. After Ignacio's confession, Heather followed through on her threat to end their relationship if he cheated. She kicked him out of the house, but her strong desire to keep her family together led her to reconsider and call him back the next day. Despite her initial anger and disbelief, Heather didn't want to break up the family and feared the impact on their daughter Victoria. Heather told Ignacio she knew he was in love with her and that she felt the same way. She said she wanted to keep their marriage together and didn't plan to file for divorce. However, she made it clear she wasn't ready to just go back to how things were right away. Instead, she gave him some conditions to meet before she'd consider taking him back. First, Ignacio had to get tested for STDs. Heather also suggested he see a counselor, thinking it would help them work through the tough parts of fixing their marriage and dealing with the underlying issues that led to him cheating. Additionally, Heather asked Ignacio to give up his rights as a father to Shauna's baby. And lastly, she wanted him to end things with Shauna altogether. Ignacio was desperate to save his marriage and agreed to all of Heather's conditions. He knew he'd hurt her and was willing to make things right. Ignacio called Shauna to break the news, with Heather standing nearby and listening to the whole conversation. Moments after Ignacio ended their phone call, Heather received a text message on her cell phone. The message included a photo of Shauna and Ignacio's son, accompanied by the words, "IGS Flesh and Blood." Shauna was enraged, still seething from Ignacio's decision to end their relationship and stay with Heather. Feeling betrayed and abandoned, her anger intensified. As a result, Shauna started openly discussing her plans to sue Ignacio for child support, seeking financial compensation for their son, Christian. By early 2007, Ignacio and Heather were working to salvage their marriage, which had been damaged by Ignacio's infidelity. Despite the obstacles, they were committed to repairing their relationship and moving forward. However, Shauna, Ignacio's former mistress, refused to let go and continued to torment Heather. The situation became so unbearable that Ignacio and Heather had to take extreme precautions to safeguard their family and property. They started parking Heather's car in the garage rather than on the street to prevent Shauna from vandalizing it. Moreover, they sought legal help and had their lawyer serve Shauna with a formal warning, instructing her to leave Ignacio, Heather, and their daughter Victoria alone. The warning explicitly stated that she must stop harassing and intimidating them. Shauna ignored the warnings and consequences, continuing to harass Heather through various methods, including text messages, emails, and voicemails, using abusive and hurtful language. On January 23, 2007, at around 6 p.m., Heather was leaving her job at the credit union, looking forward to spending the evening at home with her daughter. But her peaceful night was abruptly shattered as she exited the building with her colleagues. In the dimly lit parking lot, where they were preparing to leave in their vehicles, the group was suddenly confronted by an individual dressed in black, wearing a Halloween mask and wielding a gun. The gunman deliberately targeted Heather, while others in the group tried to hide. He pointed his weapon at her head and ordered her to kneel. Before pulling the trigger, he told her, "You ruined my life," and then shot her twice in the head at point-blank range in an execution-style killing. The gunman fled the scene in a nearby red pickup truck. As Heather lay dying, her co-workers and other witnesses in the parking lot called 911. Paramedics rushed to the scene, but were unable to save her life. The gunshot wounds to her head proved fatal, and she was pronounced dead at the scene. When the police arrived to secure the crime scene, they realized the victim was Heather, the wife of their co-worker Oso. They contacted Ignacio, telling him to rush to the hospital. Ignacio rushed through the hospital corridors to reach Heather's trauma room, but a doctor intercepted him with devastating news. It was too late, and Heather had already passed away. The news about his wife's death hit Ignacio hard. He knew he had to break the devastating news to their 9-year-old daughter, Victoria. Telling Victoria that her mother was gone was the most difficult thing Ignacio ever had to do. He and Victoria spent a long time sitting together, hugging and crying uncontrollably. Meanwhile, back at the crime scene, witnesses were sharing their accounts of the murder with the police. One witness reported seeing the shooter suddenly appear and then quickly disappear in a red pickup truck. Another witness thought the shooter might have been a woman based on the way they ran. During the investigation, the police focused on a suspect named Shauna Nelson, who had been mentioned in connection with Heather's harassment. Someone who knew about Oso's affair suggested that Shauna might have been responsible for Heather's shooting. The police officers at the crime scene were already familiar with Shauna, as she was a police dispatcher, and her husband, Ken, who was also a police officer. They also knew that Ken owned a car similar to the one the shooter was driving. With the evidence against Shauna growing, the police put out an all-points bulletin on the radio, looking for her in the red pickup truck they believed she was driving. That night, Shauna's husband, Ken Nelson, was on patrol in his police car when he heard the alert about his wife and her vehicle. He immediately started searching for her and found her driving his car near their home within 20 minutes. When Ken stopped her, Shauna claimed she had been running errands, but Ken became suspicious because she was not wearing shoes, despite it being January in Colorado. What really caught his attention, however, was that she was wearing his socks, underwear, and pants. After stopping her, Ken called in the sighting and asked for backup. Soon, police officers arrived and took Shauna into custody. The investigation into Heather's murder began to focus on whether Shauna was involved. The authorities found a pair of shoes with Shauna's DNA on them, less than 1,000 feet from the crime scene. Moreover, they recovered 2 shell casings from a .40 caliber Glock Model 22, the same type of gun used by Ken in his work. This discovery further strengthened the case against Shauna. The investigators discovered a Halloween mask, similar to the one worn by the suspect in Heather's shooting, hidden under the seat of Ken's red pickup truck. A fully drawn bathtub was found at Shauna's home during a search, leading some to suspect that she may have been planning to clean herself of any blood spatter after the shooting. After her arrest, Shauna underwent thorough testing, including swabbing her clothing and hands for gunshot residue. The test results were positive, leading to her being charged with first-degree murder, although the shell casings matched the weapon used to kill Heather. Heather's husband, Ken Nelson, handed over his service weapon to his supervisor, but the actual gun used in the murder was never found. Because Ken didn't detain Shauna after the murder, he was charged with tampering with evidence and being an accessory to first-degree murder. During her interrogation, Shauna claimed that she had gone out to run errands and had worn her husband Ken's clothes from the laundry basket, which explained why she was dressed in his clothing. When questioned about Heather's murder, Shauna denied having any knowledge of or involvement in the crime. Another situation, Ignacio, was also extensively questioned, but was cleared of all suspicion in February 2008. Shauna's trial for the murder of Heather Gauss began with Shauna pleading not guilty. The prosecution argued that Ignacio was not the first married officer with whom Shauna had an affair, and that her obsession with Ignacio was the motive behind Heather's murder. The prosecution made a deal with Shauna's former best friend, Michelle Moore, who had often accompanied Shauna when she publicly taunted Heather Garris. Michelle agreed to testify against Shauna in exchange for a reduced sentence, and she revealed how much Shauna hated Heather Gauss, even admitting to having helped plan her murder. During the trial, Shauna testified in her own defense, denying all accusations against her. She vigorously denied ever telling anyone that she fantasized about killing Heather Gauss or imagined her during target practice. She also denied any involvement in Heather's actual murder, claiming she was on her way to a liquor store at the time of the shooting. Shauna proposed an alternative theory, suggesting that her best friend Michelle was obsessed with her and wanted to make her happy by getting rid of Heather. However, when Michelle took the stand as a witness, she contradicted Shauna's claims under cross-examination. The prosecution alleged that Shauna wore her husband's clothing during the shooting to frame him for the murder. According to the prosecution, the goal was to eliminate Heather, Oso's wife, and Ken, Shauna's husband, so that Shauna and Ignacio could live together freely. After deliberating for 5 hours, the jury returned a verdict, finding Shauna and Nelson guilty of first-degree murder. The judge addressed Shauna, stating that she deserved every day of her sentence. Michelle Moore, Shauna's former best friend, received a 9-year prison sentence for her role in planning Heather's murder after testifying against Shauna. Following Shauna's murder conviction, Ken Nelson resigned from the police department, filed for divorce, and moved out of state with his children, including Shauna's son Christian, whose father is Ignacio. However, Ken later returned to Colorado, hoping that one day the children would be allowed to visit Shauna in prison, despite the circumstances. Ken remained convinced that Shauna was a loving and great mother, regardless of her actions. The charges against Ken were eventually dropped. Heather's loved ones are relieved that Shauna is behind bars, believing that justice has been served. They hope Shauna will reflect on the suffering she caused Heather and her family every day for the rest of her life. Shauna's selfish actions led to Heather's death, depriving her daughter Victoria of her mother. Tragically, Victoria died in a car accident in 2015 at the age of 17, losing control of her vehicle and striking a tree. The case of Tara Lynn Grant. Hi everyone. Today we're diving into the baffling case of a mother who disappeared from her home under mysterious circumstances. The police launched an exhaustive investigation, unearthing surprising and even bizarre clues. As they pieced together the truth, even seasoned detectives were left stunned. This case quickly became one of the most sensational in the country, with its shocking details leaving everyone outraged. Tara Grant was born on June 22, 1972, in Michigan. She grew up on a farm with her parents and sister, developing a deep love for the outdoors, horseback riding, and helping with the farm animals. In school, Tara was a sports enthusiast, participating in cheerleading, basketball, and the school band. After graduating, she attended the University of Michigan, where she met her future husband, Stephen. The couple started dating and soon tied the knot after her graduation. Tara, armed with a business degree, landed a job at a large international company. Stephen, who had ambitions in politics, initially worked as an assistant to a state senator during his university days. However, when the senator retired, Stephen found himself without a job and began working at his father's small tool-making shop. 4 years after their wedding, the couple welcomed a daughter, followed by a son a few years later. They then purchased a new home in a prestigious Macomb County, Michigan neighborhood just outside of Detroit. By this time, Tara had made substantial career progress, but it came at a cost. Her job required frequent travel, often to different states and countries, limiting her to weekend visits with her family. As a result, Stephen assumed most of the childcare responsibilities. His flexible schedule at his father's company allowed him to spend more time with the kids, but juggling work and childcare remained a challenge. To alleviate this, they decided to hire a full-time nanny. Through a special program, they found a young woman from Germany who would live with them and care for their children. Thanks to Tara's job, they could afford this arrangement, and the new nanny quickly bonded with their children, taking on most childcare duties. With his newfound free time, Stephen also started working part-time as a youth soccer coach. But despite their comfortable financial situation, Tara's constant absence put a strain on her relationship with Stephen. With her only being home on weekends, their arguments became more frequent. Tara held on to the hope that her next promotion would allow her to adjust her schedule and spend more quality time at home, but until then, she was constantly away on business trips. This uneasy routine continued until February 14, 2007, when an unexpected turn of events unfolded. On Valentine's Day, Stephen grew concerned and called the police, reporting that Tara had been out of touch for 5 days, a rarity. He recounted the events of February 9th, when Tara returned from a business trip, only to announce she had to leave a day early, leaving them with just 1 day together. The tension between them escalated into another argument, and Tara began packing her suitcase. Stephen overheard her making a hushed phone call, saying, "I'll be waiting at the end of the street," before she swiftly departed, getting into a dark-colored car. Since then, Tara had been unreachable, ignoring all of Stephen's calls. The police's first question was why Stephen had waited 5 days to report Tara's disappearance. But Stephen claimed he hadn't been initially concerned, thinking she'd simply left early for her business trip and was ignoring his calls due to their recent argument. However, as the days passed, he began to worry when she failed to contact the kids, aged 3 and 7, as she normally did when away. Then, on Monday, Tara's boss called to say she'd missed a meeting, which was highly unusual and suggested she hadn't gone to work at all. Stephen informed Tara's relatives about her disappearance, but they were skeptical, assuming she'd taken a break from him and their constant arguing. After all, Tara had confided in her parents about the strain her job was putting on their relationship and the frequent rows that had become a regular feature of their lives. Her relatives thought she'd soon return home, needing time and space from Stephen. As time passed, Tara's absence continued, and her silence persisted. Eventually, Stephen's concern turned to worry, and he contacted the police. During the police interrogation, the officers noticed several suspicious scratches on Stephen's body. When questioned about a possible physical altercation with his wife, Stephen attributed the marks to his frequent work with metal parts at his father's shop, citing regular scratches as an occupational hazard. Following the station interview, the detectives requested a search of the couple's home, which Stephen granted. Upon arrival, they found that all of Tara's belongings, including her personal documents and purse, were missing, along with her luggage. Stephen also provided access to Tara's computer, allowing the detectives to review her bank account activity. The lack of transactions since her disappearance seemed unusual, as one would expect some financial activity if she had indeed traveled, such as booking a flight or hotel. During the search of the house, detectives failed to uncover any clues that could explain Tara's disappearance. With no signs of a crime, they were left to retracing her steps since February 9th. The local police department, accustomed to handling minor disputes and non-violent incidents in the area, was inexperienced in investigating such cases, given the region's reputation as one of the safest in the country. Stephen was outraged when asked to take a polygraph test, feeling accused by the police. He tearfully insisted he would never harm his wife. The police departed, considering their next moves, but Stephen surprisingly called them the following morning, ready to cooperate. However, just moments later, his lawyer intervened, advising against the interrogation. The police had no choice but to focus on Stephen as the prime suspect, being Tara's husband. Standard procedure aside, they had no other leads to pursue. Tara's relatives, friends, and colleagues all claimed to have had no contact with her since February 9th and were clueless about her whereabouts. Moreover, her bank account remained inactive, despite her likely need for financial transactions. Detectives shifted their focus to Stephen, and it didn't take long to uncover an important detail. His driver's license had been revoked, yet he continued to drive. They waited for him to get behind the wheel and then arrested him. However, Stephen still felt like he was being treated as a suspect and refused to cooperate with the police. His lawyer quickly secured his release, and Stephen returned home. The police persisted in their search for clues, obtaining Tara's mobile phone records in the process. They found that her last call was made on the day she vanished, when she called Stephen from the airport, saying she'd be home soon. After that, Stephen made numerous calls to her, but they all went to voicemail. The detectives listened to these recordings, in which Stephen repeatedly asked her to answer or call back, accusing her of neglecting their children. He also pleaded with her to come home for their sake. The phone itself was turned off, and according to the cell phone carrier's data, it last connected to cell towers near Tara's house on the evening of her disappearance. Notably, there were no incoming calls during that period. As we recall, Stephen revealed that Tara had received a call before leaving the house, with the caller stating she would wait for her on the street. However, upon reviewing Stephen's voicemail recordings, detectives sensed genuine concern for his wife's well-being, accompanied by anger towards her decision to leave their children behind. Despite this, they didn't clear him as a suspect just yet. The investigation stalled, yielding no new leads, as Stephen persisted in refusing police cooperation, accusing them of misallocating resources on him rather than focusing on finding Tara. Conversely, he actively courted the media, which began extensive coverage of the case from its early stages. Tara's enigmatic disappearance sparked widespread public interest, and Stephen became a constant presence in front of cameras, daily pleading for her safe return. As the case unfolded, the company that had facilitated the hiring of the nanny for Stephen and Tara took action, ultimately deciding to send her back to Germany. Prior to her departure, she provided a statement to the authorities, speaking highly of her experience in their household. She also revealed that on the evening Tara returned home, she had been out at a bar with friends. Upon her return, she encountered Stephen, who appeared distraught, informing her that Tara had just exited the house. Despite refusing to cooperate with the police, Stephen hired a former FBI agent as a private detective to investigate Tara's disappearance. However, this effort also yielded no results. With no leads, the police decided to take a different approach. They contacted the agency that helped Tara and Stephen find their nanny, and there they made an interesting discovery. Before hiring the nanny from Germany, the couple had employed 6 other nannies, none of whom stayed in the job for long. When detectives spoke to these former nannies, almost all described Stephen's behavior as not only strange, but also intimidating. According to their accounts, Stephen would rummage through their belongings, ask them inappropriate questions, and frequently yell at them, treating them like they were his subordinates. The police were puzzled by the stark contrast between these descriptions and the German nanny's glowing account of her time with the family. They obtained permission to monitor her emails and phone calls, which led to a surprising revelation. Detectives uncovered messages between the nanny and Stephen, revealing that they had been having an affair. It turned out that the 19-year-old nanny had been in a romantic relationship with Stephen during Tara's business trips, and this continued until she was forced to leave the country. Although the police considered Stephen's infidelity a significant lead, it did not directly link him to Tara's disappearance. Thus, they continued searching for additional evidence. During interviews with Tara's relatives and friends, detectives discovered that almost everyone had disliked Stephen since she married him. They described him as behaving strangely, trying to control her every move, and having poor relationships with her family members. The investigation further revealed that Stephen's former girlfriend, whom he dated before meeting Tara, contacted the police with some information. She disclosed that Stephen had reached out to her several months prior, and their conversations gradually became more intimate over time. Stephen eventually expressed his desire to start a romantic relationship with her, despite both being married. He also complained about Tara's frequent absences and suspected her of cheating on him with her boss. Furthermore, he admitted to installing special software on her computer, which allowed him to read her messages, but found no evidence to support his suspicions. All of this led the police to strongly suspect the husband's involvement in Tara's disappearance, but they still required concrete evidence. Weeks into the investigation, they started considering the grim possibility that Tara might no longer be alive, and thus launched a massive search operation to find her body. They recruited volunteers and combed the area within a several-mile radius of Tara's home, as well as a nearby large park. The search continued for days, but yielded nothing. This stalemate persisted until February 28th, when a local resident contacted the police. Aware of Tara's disappearance and the ongoing search, the woman had been vigilant during her walk in the same park. She soon spotted something unusual under one of the trees along the trail. A plastic bag camouflaged with branches and snow, obviously containing something. Curious, the woman took a closer look and saw rubber gloves and metal shavings-like objects inside the bag, as well as a dark red substance at the bottom. She decided to take the bag with her and handed it over to the police. Detectives immediately realized that there was likely blood at the bottom of the bag and sent it to the lab. However, there was a problem. Experts warned that due to a high workload, DNA analysis could take up to 2 months. Nevertheless, they examined the contents and confirmed that it did indeed seem to be human blood. The police immediately focused their search efforts in the area where the bag was found, deploying all available resources. Stephen did not participate in the search, citing bias from the police. Instead, he gave a lengthy interview to a news channel, making quite a few questionable statements. He repeatedly criticized Tara for being absent from her home most of the time, labeling her a bad mother. Stephen claimed he took on almost all parenting responsibilities and was a better mother than she was. When reporters asked about their financial situation and whether he had been living mostly on Tara's money, Stephen became angry and insisted he didn't need a penny from her. During the interview, Stephen made accusations of infidelity against Tara, but he failed to provide any evidence to support his claims. Throughout the conversation, he consistently denigrated Tara, emphasizing the difficulties he had faced in their marriage. Meanwhile, the detectives made significant progress in their investigation. Previously, they had been unable to obtain a search warrant for Tara's home due to lack of sufficient grounds, and Stephen had refused to grant them voluntary access. However, after the discovery of the blood-stained bag in the park, the judge finally granted the warrant. As the police arrived at the house, Stephen returned from the interview. Upon being informed of the search warrant, he unlocked the door for the detectives before contacting his lawyer. The lawyer asked the police if his client, Stephen, was under arrest, and they replied that he was not. Stephen then announced that he would take his dog for a walk, retrieved it from the house, and left the premises while the police conducted a search. As the police searched the house room by room, they eventually reached the garage, where one of the detectives spotted a large green container holding several plastic bags. Upon opening one of the bags, they discovered an unknown substance along with what appeared to be women's clothing. Opening another bag, the officer was horrified to find what likely were human remains. In total, the container held 5 bags, and the detectives quickly confirmed that they contained the remains of a woman. The police realized that they had found Tara's body and that Stephen was likely her killer. However, Stephen had not returned, so the police immediately launched a search for him, fearing he might flee or harm someone else, knowing that he would likely face prison time. Meanwhile, officers called in reinforcements to search the nearby park, as only a portion of Tara's remains were found in the garage. Over 100 officers from neighboring districts were dispatched to assist in the search. Their efforts quickly paid off, as they found another part of the body several hundred yards from where the bag was discovered, and later they found the head. Due to the cold temperatures, the remains were well preserved, allowing detectives to confirm that they belonged to Tara. As the search continued, the police found several more body parts, and when night fell, the search was suspended until morning. All this time, detectives were also trying to track down Stephen, but they were unsuccessful. They contacted his friends, and one of them came forward, saying Stephen had phoned him to let him know the police were searching his house and asking for a ride from the street. The friend drove to the location and picked Stephen up, taking him to his own home. During the drive, the friend noticed Stephen's strange behavior. He was terrified, his hands were trembling, and it seemed like he was on the edge of a nervous collapse. Once they arrived at the friend's house, Stephen asked to see his kids and requested to borrow the friend's car. At the time, Stephen's children were living in another state with his sister. The friend handed over his pickup truck, and Stephen took off. The police asked for information about Stephen's phone and credit cards, which enabled them to rapidly trace his journey. They found that Stephen had made several cash withdrawals on his way to the neighboring state and had phoned his sister, leading the police to conclude that he was heading towards his children. They immediately set off in that direction. Just then, an unexpected call came in from Germany. It was from the nanny with whom Stephen had previously been in a romantic relationship. She informed the police that Stephen had just called her, confessing to killing Tara. According to Stephen, the couple had an argument that evening, during which he yelled at her. Tara slapped him in the face, and in a fit of rage, he pushed her, causing her to fall and hit her head on the floor, resulting in her death. The police had no doubt about Stephen's involvement, but they still had to track him down. They searched the area along the highway to the neighboring state for several hours, and eventually found the car belonging to Stephen's friend, abandoned near the entrance to the national park. However, Stephen himself was nowhere to be found. The police then focused their search on the park, and several hours later, with the help of thermal cameras, they finally located him. He was lying under a tree, wearing only light clothing, and the officers realized he was on the verge of dying from hypothermia. In an altered state, Stephen was talking to trees and muttering incoherent phrases. The police quickly airlifted him to the hospital. Doctors managed to save his life. However, it took some time for Stephen to fully recover. While in the hospital, Stephen was charged with murder, and the detectives handed the case over to the court on the same day. Notably, his lawyer withdrew from defending him, citing that he needed to be able to look at himself in the mirror in the mornings when asked why. A new lawyer was assigned to Stephen, and meanwhile, forensic experts examined Tara's remains. A renowned pathologist who had worked on high-profile cases, such as the J.F. Kennedy and John Bennett Ramsey cases, was appointed as the chief medical examiner. After examining the remains, the pathologist concluded that Stephen's initial account of events did not align with reality. Stephen had claimed that Tara died from a head injury, but the actual cause of death was revealed to be strangulation. When Stephen regained consciousness, detectives visited him in the hospital, and he told them what truly happened that evening. He confessed that when Tara came home and announced she had to leave earlier, they got into an argument, and he started yelling at her. As she tried to leave the room, he grabbed her and Tara hit him in the face. Enraged, Stephen retaliated and then strangled her. Stephen dragged Tara's body from the second floor to the garage and put her in the trunk of her own car. At the same time, the nanny returned home, and Stephen lied to her, saying his wife had just left him. The next morning, he took the body to his father's workshop, making sure he was alone. There, he destroyed all of Tara's documents and personal belongings, and then dismembered her body using a saw. This gruesome task made him vomit twice, but he kept telling himself that if he didn't do it, he would spend the rest of his life in prison. After several hours, he packed the remains into plastic bags and put them in a container. He then returned home, leaving the body in the car for a few days. During this time, he was thinking of ways to get rid of the body without arousing suspicion. To create an alibi, he repeatedly called Tara's phone and left messages on her voicemail, pleading with her to come home. One day, Stephen took his children's snow sled to the park, where the bags containing human remains would later be discovered. He placed a container on the sled and pulled it up a hill, away from the crowded areas. However, the rope slipped out of his hands, and the sled rolled down the hill, causing the container to overturn and the bags to spill out. Stephen picked up the bags, put the container back on the sled, and eventually buried them under the snow in a remote area before returning home. Days later, when the police started searching for Tara, detectives announced they were launching a search operation in the park. Stephen became anxious, as he knew one of the bags, the largest one, was not hidden well and feared it would be found quickly. He went to the park, retrieved a few bags, and carried them to his father's workshop, leaving them on the roof. The day before his interview, Stephen took a container from his home to the workshop, retrieved some bags from it, and brought them back to his garage. The next day, the police obtained a search warrant for his house and found the bags in the container, which led to Stephen's confession. It turned out that Stephen had planned to take his own life rather than surrender, but he couldn't follow through with it. even after nearly freezing to death. During his conversation with the police, Stephen showed no remorse for his actions and would often smile and joke, even when discussing how he got rid of the body. While awaiting trial in prison, Stephen's children stayed with his sister. However, Tara's family was unhappy with this arrangement, and eventually they managed to have the children moved to Tara's sister's care. Although Stephen's family still had visitation rights, Tara's relatives were relieved to have the children out of his sister's hands, especially given her continued sympathy for Stephen and her insensitive jokes about Tara's murder. The trial started in November 2007, and Stephen admitted his guilt from the outset. Despite this, his new lawyer attempted to secure a lighter sentence by highlighting the marital issues that had been plaguing Stephen and his wife for years, largely due to her frequent absences. However, evidence presented during the trial contradicted Stephen's claim that Tara had been planning to leave a day earlier. Her boss testified that she had no additional meetings scheduled and was expected to start work at her usual time. This was corroborated by Tara's sister, who had spoken with her shortly before the murder and was told that she would be home all weekend, as usual. Furthermore, there was no credible evidence to suggest that Tara was having an affair. Her boss confirmed that their relationship was purely professional, and this was supported by their email exchanges and text messages. Even Stephen himself acknowledged that he had no basis for believing this. Ultimately, the prosecution was unable to prove that Stephen had planned the murder in advance. It appeared that he had committed the crime in a fit of rage, which could have led to a charge of second-degree murder rather than first-degree murder. On December 21, 2007, a jury delivered a unanimous guilty verdict against Stephen, and he received a minimum 50-year prison sentence. Despite his lawyer's efforts to appeal the verdict, it was unsuccessful. Stephen has since been serving his sentence in prison, but there is more to his story. The murder of Tara garnered widespread national attention, and Stephen seemed to revel in the notoriety. While incarcerated, he began writing a book and sought his sister's assistance to have it published. They even explored the possibility of adapting it into a film, with Stephen considering which renowned actor could portray him. In 2008, new information emerged. Stephen's children confided in their aunt, revealing that they had actually seen their father kill their mother on that fateful evening. They had come out of their room after hearing screams and witnessed the entire traumatic event. When this news broke in the media, Stephen's relatives accused the children of lying and continued to defend him. In the same year, it was also discovered that Stephen's father, who had not supported his son, was overcome with grief and guilt, and his body was found in his own home. To this day, Stephen remains in prison, and he will not be eligible for parole until 2058. Every year, Tara's relatives and friends organize a marathon along the route in the park where she used to jog regularly, and her children always participate. Despite their father's heinous actions, they have found the strength to move forward and honor their mother's memory. The case of Nicole Lenway. Nicole Lenway, also known as Nikki Lenford, was born on July 11, 1989, in a small town in Minnesota. There is little information available about her parents and early life. According to some reports, her father left the family when she was young, and her mother raised her alone, providing her with a good education. Nikki was an exceptional student and athlete, excelling in track and field and martial arts. She decided to dedicate her life to fighting crime and served in law enforcement. After graduating with honors from the police academy, she moved to Minneapolis and joined the Criminal Investigation Department as an assistant investigator. Colleagues described Nikki as a determined, goal-oriented woman and a fearless officer, ready to take risks. However, in her personal life, she became a pawn in the hands of a sophisticated manipulator. In 2012, at a martial arts competition, 23-year-old Nicole met Timothy "Tim" Ama, a coach and martial arts master who was 8 years her senior. Timothy, a gentleman man, won Nicky's heart with his charming nature and kind gestures. He demonstrated his reliability and care, making Nicky fall deeply in love with him. They started a romantic relationship and moved in together. Initially, everything was wonderful, and Nicky felt happy and loved. However, Timothy's behavior began to change gradually. He revealed his true nature, but subtly enough that Nicky wasn't alarmed at first. Behind his charming facade, Timothy was a sophisticated tormentor who enjoyed flirting with other women, even in Nicky's presence. This behavior hurt and humiliated Nicky, making her feel insecure. Nicky had hoped that Timothy would eventually settle down and become more restrained, but months passed and his behavior didn't change. He continued to flirt and engage in affairs, assuring Nicky that he loved only her. When Nicky confronted him, he would snap at her, saying she had no right to tell him what to do. He would later apologize, telling Nicky that no one would ever love her as much as he did, and she would forgive him. The situation escalated in the fall of 2014 when Timothy flew into a rage during a minor argument, grabbing Nicky by the throat and choking her until she almost lost consciousness. He then pushed her into a wall, making her realize that she was in an unhealthy relationship. However, her emotional attachment to Timothy was too strong, and she forgave him once again. Timothy's behavior towards Nicky was extremely controlling and jealous. He would constantly monitor her movements, check her phone and social media without her permission, and accuse her of infidelity without any evidence. Despite his own infidelity, he would manipulate Nicky into believing that no one would ever love her as much as he did, trapping her in the relationship. In November 2015, after a violent argument, Nicky gathered her belongings and left the house. Timothy, who didn't believe she would actually leave, chased her down, grabbed her by the hair, and dragged her back inside. However, Nicky's screams and struggles attracted the attention of their neighbors, forcing Timothy to back down. Finally, free from the abusive relationship, Nicky felt a sense of relief. But Timothy didn't give up. He shifted his tactics from threats and blackmail to romantic gestures, sending flowers and messages filled with tenderness, pleading for another chance. For a month, Nicky stood firm, refusing to return to him. However, her plans were disrupted when she discovered she was pregnant in December 2015. Nicky knew that if Timothy found out, he would use it to manipulate her into getting back together. She tried to keep her pregnancy a secret, but their mutual friends and acquaintances soon informed Timothy, who urged her to return to him, arguing that their child should grow up in a complete family. Nicky, who grew up without a father, understood the challenges of single parenthood, but she also recognized that being with a manipulative and cruel person like Timothy would be detrimental to her and the child. Despite still having feelings for him, she refused to reunite with her ex-boyfriend, but she did agree to let him participate in their child's life as a nominal father. Nicole gave birth to a healthy boy named Callahan Ammer on June 20th, 2016. The father, Tim, acknowledged paternity and initially expressed a desire to raise the child with Nicole. However, it soon became clear that Tim was not interested in being a good father and only wanted to use the child as a tool to manipulate Nicole. Nicole took almost a year of maternity leave to care for her son, devoting herself entirely to motherhood. Meanwhile, Tim continued his carefree life with multiple lovers and casual connections. He even had a system in place where he would signal to his lovers when he was available by turning on a purple light in his bedroom. In 2016, Tim started living with his 18-year-old protege, Colin, who had been deeply in love with him since she was 14. Despite the significant age difference, the couple hid their relationship from outsiders, claiming Colin was just renting a room in Tim's house. By the summer of 2017, Nicole was forced to return to work as a forensic expert at the Maine Police Headquarters in Minneapolis. With her unpredictable work schedule, she would often ask Tim to look after their son, mainly because she believed it was beneficial for the boy to spend time with his father and to save on nanny costs. However, Tim would always shift the responsibility onto Colin, who developed a fondness for the little boy and enjoyed taking care of him. Tim would tell Colin that Nicole was a bad mother who didn't want to care for her child and was looking for excuses to offload her son onto them. In the spring of 2017, Nicole started a new romantic relationship with a fellow police officer named Donovan Ford, who treated her with tenderness and care and expressed a desire to adopt Callahan. However, when Tim found out about their relationship, he became enraged and decided to use their son and the naive Colin to destroy Nicole's new relationship. Tim would regularly report to social services that Donovan was abusing Callahan and that Nicole was doing nothing to stop it, resulting in frequent visits from Child Protective Services. For years, Nicole and her new partner were subjected to harassment and intimidation by her ex-boyfriend, Timothy, who falsely accused them of domestic violence. Timothy convinced Colin, a friend, that Nicole and her partner were a danger to their son, Callahan, and that they might harm him. Timothy continued to psychologically manipulate Colin, convincing him that Callahan was in danger and that Nicole and her partner were cruel to him. Meanwhile, Timothy harassed and threatened Nicole and her partner, even filing false police reports against them. Donovan tried to have a calm and rational conversation with Timothy, but it didn't work. Timothy continued to terrorize Nicole and her partner, making their lives a living hell. He eventually took the matter to court, claiming he wanted sole custody of their son. Nicole was terrified, knowing Timothy's ability to lie and manipulate. She understood that he didn't actually care about their son's well-being. He just wanted to punish her for moving on with her life. Meanwhile, Nicole decided to seek a restraining order against Timothy, citing his erratic behavior and the threat he posed to her and her family. She was confident that she would gain custody of their son, but she knew the legal battles could drag on for years. During this time, Timothy continued to concoct fabricated stories, including a false accusation that Nicole had tried to run him over with her car. However, he couldn't provide any evidence to support his claim. In September 2022, the custody case went to court, with Timothy accusing Nicole of harming their son. However, the court saw through his lies and awarded sole custody to Nicole. Despite this, Timothy persisted and appealed the decision. He was eventually allowed to see his son at a specialized family center designed to minimize conflict between parents. However, on April 19, 2022, when Nicole arrived at the family center to pick up her son, a mysterious attacker dressed in black clothing and a mask approached her, shot her 4 times at close range, and quickly disappeared. Incredibly, Nicole remained conscious and managed to call emergency services despite being severely injured. A woman happened to be driving by when she heard shots fired and saw a black figure jump into a vehicle and speed away. She immediately pulled over to ensure the shooter was gone, then rushed to help the victim, Nicole. The woman explained what had happened to the dispatcher, provided the address, and pressed her clothing against Nicole's wounds to stop the bleeding, ultimately saving her life. Nicole spent several days in a coma, teetering on the brink of life and death. She lost a lot of blood and her vital organs were affected, but doctors managed to stabilize her condition. Medical professionals believed Nicole was incredibly lucky, as death was only millimeters away from 2 bullets. One passed near an artery and the other nearly struck her heart. When Nicole regained consciousness, she reported to the police that her ex-lover, Timothy, was the one who had shot her. The police interrogated Timothy, who had a solid alibi since he was at the family center with his son at the time of the attack, as confirmed by staff and internal surveillance footage. The investigation also explored the possibility that someone among the criminals Nicole had previously arrested might have organized the attack. 4 casings were found at the scene, and a camera at the nearest intersection captured a suspicious black Dodge Ram pickup running a red light without license plates. An eyewitness reported seeing the same vehicle, which led the police to check what vehicles Timothy owned. During another interrogation, Timothy mentioned owning a Chevrolet Traverse SUV and a Dodge Challenger, but not a pickup. However, the investigation revealed that Timothy was lying, and a black Dodge Ram, identical to the one used by the shooter, was registered in his name. When shown the surveillance footage, Timothy admitted to owning the pickup, but claimed he rarely used it. The vehicle was equipped with colorful stickers, which were verified, but appeared to have been applied recently. While all the evidence was circumstantial, the police needed to find the weapon and the actual shooter to fully resolve the case. It was discovered that Timothy's vehicle had a satellite navigation system, allowing the tracing of the vehicle's entire route. The system revealed that the car was brought to the back entrance of a Tando school on the evening of April 18th, where it remained all night and almost the entire next day. Road cameras traced the vehicle's route, showing it arrived with license plates. The evening after the incident, the car used in the crime was found, but without the perpetrators. The person who drove the car that day was short and slender, with a feminine silhouette from a distance. As a result, the police decided to detain and question Amma's live-in girlfriend, Colin Larson. A search of their home was also conducted, and although the weapon used in the crime was not found, the police discovered ammunition of the same caliber. Colin, who was frightened, soon began to give confessional testimony, confirming that Timothy was the mastermind behind the crime. However, Colin believed that Timothy had acted with good intentions, thinking they were trying to save little Callahan from a cruel mother. Timothy had spent years manipulating Colin, convincing her that the boy was being mistreated and subjected to violence, and she unquestioningly believed every word. She felt sorry for the child and believed that Timothy wanted to protect him. The trial of the conspirators began in November of the same year. Colin confessed that Timothy had provided her with the firearm and had taken it back after the assassination attempt, but she didn't know what he did with it. The prosecution was largely built on circumstantial evidence, but Colin's confession was the decisive factor. The court also considered the testimony of the victim, Nicole, about Timothy's manipulative nature and his ability to deceive the women who loved him. Timothy Amma was found guilty of organizing a first-degree attempted murder, as well as incitement and aiding and abetting, and was sentenced to 18 years in prison. Colin Larson received 16 years in prison as the executive. A year after the assassination attempt, Nicole fully recovered physically and emotionally. She and Donovan officially legalized their relationship, and he became a loving father to Callahan. The now married Ford couple is expecting their first child together, and the woman who saved Nicole's life will be the child's godmother. It should be added that Timothy will be eligible for parole in 2035, but he will be prohibited from coming within 100 meters of his son, former lover, and her family members, and from attempting any form of contact with them. The case of Ben Rennick. In 1989, the Rennick family relocated to a charming farmhouse where Ben developed an interest in snakes. However, their happiness was short-lived. In September 1992, a gas leak caused an explosion at their home while they were away, forcing them to move into a trailer. Rennick family faced another challenge when Ben's mother, Kim, was diagnosed with advanced breast cancer. Despite these difficulties, the close-knit family supported each other through thick and thin. In 2002, they moved into a new home that included a special room for Ben's snakes. Tragically, Kim lost her battle with cancer in 2009. Before her passing, she made her sons promise to preserve the farm and pass it down to their children. Ben's passion for snakes only grew stronger, and he eventually founded Rennick Reptiles, earning recognition worldwide. He began selling snakes globally, from the UK to Japan, and breeding them became his life's purpose. Ben, a dedicated and passionate breeder, put the needs of his snakes above financial gain. His reptile farm was a treasure trove of reptilian subspecies, featuring both common and rare species from around the world. The value of his python collection alone exceeded $1 million. Despite his professional success, Ben felt lonely and longed to start a family. That changed in 2010 when he met Lindley at a party. Their relationship blossomed quickly, and soon he introduced her to his brother Sam and his fiancée, Eli. As it turned out, both Eli and Lindley had sons from previous relationships, which helped them bond and become fast friends. Lindley seamlessly integrated into the Rennick family, and they began living together. As Ben's partner, Lindley assisted him on the snake breeding farm. They were deeply in love and functioned as a united family even before making their relationship official. In March 2012, Lindley gave birth to their daughter, Amelia, filling Ben with joy as he became a first-time father. However, their happiness was short-lived, as Ben's father, Frank Rennick, faced significant business troubles stemming from fraudulent stock transactions made to cover medical bills for his wife, Kim's treatment. Frank took his own life just one day before the FBI was scheduled to visit the farm. The investigation came to a halt as a result, and Frank's sons, Ben and Sam, were deeply affected by the loss of their father. After their parents' passing, the brothers put aside their grief to support each other. Ben inherited the family home and farm, while Sam received a large sum of money that was significantly more than the house was worth. Despite having their own families and children, the brothers decided to stay together in their childhood home, forming one large, close-knit family. Sam used his inheritance to repair the farm, and initially everything seemed fine. However, financial disagreements soon caused tension between the brothers. After their father's passing, Ben focused on his business and family. He married Lindley on April 14, 2014, making her a full member of the Rennick family. Ben and Lindley opened a second business, a spa called Essentia Spa Inc., which Lindley managed. However, the spa struggled financially, leading to frequent arguments between Ben and Lindley about money. Despite her best efforts, Lindley was unable to generate enough revenue to cover the spa's expenses. At the same time, Sam and his wife struggled financially. Ben granted them permission to sell some of the furniture in the house, but Lindley strongly disagreed with this decision, which caused a rift between the two families and ultimately led to an irreparable breakdown in their relationship. Ben planned to sell some rare reptiles to improve his family's finances, but the deal fell through because of a tragic event that occurred on the farm on June 8, 2017. On that day, Lindley found her husband Ben lying in a pool of blood on the floor of one of the farm's barns. She called her brother-in-law Sam for help and reported the emergency, saying she had found Ben unconscious. During the call, Lindley abruptly dropped the phone and ran outside. Sam continued talking to the emergency operator and sadly confirmed that his brother had died. Sam suspected that a snake might be responsible for the incident. The Montgomery County Sheriff's deputies were eventually called to the snake breeding facility, a place they hadn't visited in a long time. However, they were hesitant to enter the farm, fearing they would encounter over 3,000 snakes while investigating the scene where Ben's body lay in blood. Coroner Dave Colbert approached the scene with caution, aware of the possibility of a deadly viper attack. However, upon closer inspection, he found a shell casing on a shelf, indicating a far more sinister scenario. Multiple shell casings were discovered near the body, but no weapon was found. The autopsy revealed that Ben had been shot multiple times in the back and head. Despite this, none of the relatives reported hearing any shots or seeing the attacker. Sam and Lindley, Ben's relatives, were taken to the sheriff's office for questioning. During the interview, Lindley suggested that Sam might have been involved in Ben's death, citing a potential motive. Ben wanted to sell the house, but Sam was opposed. To clear his name, Sam agreed to take a lie detector test, which he passed. With no evidence to hold them, the police released Lindley and Sam. The investigation continued, exploring various theories about who might have wanted Ben Rennick dead. The police initially suspected that Ben Rennick's death might be linked to robbery, but this theory was quickly ruled out because none of the rare snakes in the house were taken and no valuables were missing. In the days following Ben's death, The police questioned Lindley, Ben's wife, and tested her hands and clothing for signs of gunpowder residue. However, the test results came back negative. After Ben's funeral, Lindley cut off all contact with her brothers-in-law, Sam and Eli, and began making moves to sell her husband's business and claim a $1 million life insurance payout. Her plan was to use the insurance money to pay off the mortgage on the Rennick family home, which she intended to sell for $740,000. When Sam and Eli found out about Lindley's quick insurance claim and her plans to sell the house, they became suspicious and notified the authorities. Sam, in particular, suspected that his brother's wife might be involved in Ben's death and shared his concerns with the investigators. As a result, Lindley was questioned again by the police, during which she revealed that she had a complicated relationship with Ben and had been secretly meeting with a man named Eric. Although Eric had an alibi, it seemed suspicious to the investigators. Lindley made some stunning confessions. Approximately 3 years into her officially recognized marriage, she admitted to having had affairs with at least 2 different men. Furthermore, text messages exchanged between the couples imply that Ben had been suspicious of his wife's infidelity, which had been causing significant tension in their relationship lately. On October 5, 2017, Lindley underwent a polygraph test conducted by the Missouri State Highway Patrol, but the results indicated deception. While the test raised suspicions, it did not provide sufficient concrete evidence to directly implicate her in Ben's murder, so she was released from custody. The investigation persisted, albeit at a slower pace. It was later discovered that Lindley had attempted to kill Ben a month before his death. She had fabricated a story about Ben being abusive and shared it with a coworker at a spa salon, gaining their sympathy and assistance. The coworker helped Lindley plot to kill Ben by making him a protein shake laced with 15 Percocet pills. Unbeknownst to Ben, he drank the shake and fell severely ill, but survived, unaware that he had been poisoned. Lindley was questioned by investigators 6 times. A major breakthrough came on January 14, 2012, when a witness from a state prison came forward, claiming to have information about Ben's death. The witness, Brandon Blackwell, told investigators that Lindley had shot Ben and conspired with her ex-boyfriend. Brandon said he dated Lindley, who was married to Ben, and they had a child together about 1.5 years after Ben's death. However, by 2019, they had broken up. Brandon claimed that Lindley told him she plotted with her coworker Ashley Shaw and her ex-boyfriend Michael Humphrey to kill Ben. Lindley and Michael were arrested for Ben's murder, but they blamed each other for the crime. Michael said that on the day of the murder, Lindley asked him to pose as a buyer at the farm, and he was supposed to shoot Ben while wearing gloves. However, he couldn't bring himself to do it. According to Michael, Lindley then took the gun and shot Ben herself. The investigation into Ben's death took 3 years. On January 16, 2020, arrest warrants were issued for Lindley, Michael, and Ashley. Ashley was given immunity in exchange for her cooperation and testified against Lindley, her former boss at the spa salon. Ashley said that Lindley had complained about Ben, claiming he was abusive and belittling, and convinced her to help with a plan to kill him. Lindley feared that if she divorced Ben, he would gain custody of their children, so she plotted to kill him by poisoning him with a lethal cocktail. When questioned, Lindley and her accomplice Michael accused each other of Ben's murder. In October 2021, Michael Humphrey went on trial in Ain County. His lawyers hoped to reduce his sentence by revealing the murder weapon, which would lead to a second-degree murder charge. Although Michael had the gun, no conclusive DNA evidence was found on it to lessen his sentence. However, he made a deal with the prosecution, revealing the location of the murder weapon. In exchange, he received a life sentence for second-degree murder, without a trial, on January 3, 2021. This meant Michael Humphrey would be imprisoned for life, with the possibility of parole. The trial of Lindley Rennick started on December 6, 2021, for the shooting death of her husband Ben Rennick on June 8, 2017, at his snake breeding facility in New Florence. According to court documents, the plot to kill Ben originated at Lindley's spa salon. The probable cause statement revealed that Ben knew about Lindley's financial troubles and her fear that he might take their children away, leading her to falsely claim domestic abuse. The first attempt on Ben's life involved a protein shake laced with drugs, which was confirmed by search warrants for their Facebook accounts. These searches also showed that Ben was aware of Lindley's financial issues. In court, the events of the day Ben was killed were reconstructed through cross-examination. On that day, Michael Humphrey picked up Lindley from the spa salon, while Shaw sent deceptive text messages from Lindley's phone, hiding their true location and trying to mislead the investigation, according to court documents. Humphrey tried to kill Ben, but couldn't finish the job, so he asked Lindley to do it for him after firing some shots. In his hurry, Humphrey picked up most of the bullet casings, but missed a few. After returning to the spa, Lindley took a shower, which helped remove any gunpowder residue from her hands and clothes. Humphrey also got rid of Lindley's clothing to avoid raising suspicion. During the trial, defense attorney Catherine Barrera tried to portray Lindley as a victim of domestic violence by highlighting her personal history, family, education, and her relationship with ex-boyfriend Michael Humphrey. However, no evidence supported this claim, weakening the defense's argument. Lindley was involved with Michael Humphrey, who was part of a group that plotted to kill Ben. Lindley described their relationship as codependent, with Humphrey dealing drugs and her being addicted. She broke up with Humphrey in 2010, but reconnected with him about a month before Ben's murder. Lindley Rennick denied planning to kill her husband Ben, including the alleged attempt to poison him with a protein shake. At the time, their spa business was failing, and they were experiencing financial and marital problems. Lindley admitted to having affairs with multiple men, which she deeply regretted. When she considered divorce, she didn't know who to turn to, given her father's experience with divorce and his strong views on the matter. She reconnected with an old boyfriend, Michael Humphrey, seeking support to discuss divorce with Ben. In court, Lindley confessed to intentionally hiding Michael's involvement in Ben's death due to their troubled marriage, which included disagreements, physical and sexual abuse, and the stress of Ben's snake breeding business. She was afraid of Ben and worried about his reaction when she would bring up divorce. On June 8, 2017, Lindley brought Michael to their farm, claiming she only wanted to discuss divorce, not harm Ben. She took out the trash, then saw Michael and Ben washing their hands in the nursery. She didn't hear their conversation, focusing on how to initiate the divorce discussion. Lindley described seeing Michael draw a gun and shoot Ben, after which she screamed, ran outside, and heard more shots. Everything seemed numb, and she stared at the trees as Michael came to her and pushed her towards the car. When she returned to the snake breeding facility and saw Ben's body, reality hit her. She called Ben's brother, Sam, and they checked Ben's pulse and breathing, hoping he might still be alive. Lindley regretted not telling the police about her presence at the facility with Michael, which led to suspicion and investigation. Although there was a $1 million life insurance policy, Lindley waived her rights to the money. She received some financial compensation from a trust set up by Ben's father, which benefited Ben and their children, not herself. Lindley shared her story with her then-boyfriend Brandon Blackwell, but their relationship ended after she had his child during the trial. She expressed remorse for her continuous deception, saying she was trying to escape the truth of what happened and never wanted her husband's death. Lindley Rennick's defense team did not request a new trial or appeal her conviction. Instead, she filed a lawsuit against Blackwell, accusing him of making false statements about her role in her husband's death. During the trial, prosecutor Kevin Zellner questioned Lindley Rennick's credibility, pointing out inconsistencies in her story. He asked why she didn't check on her husband after hearing gunshots, didn't call 911, sent friendly messages to Blackwell and Humphrey after the shooting, and continued to lie as emergency responders arrived. Lindley Rennick admitted to suggesting her brother-in-law as a suspect, and Zellner portrayed her as a calculating but clumsy mastermind. He accused her of being heartless for accusing the victim's brother. On December 9, 2021, Lindley Rennick was found guilty of second-degree murder and armed criminal action. She broke down during sentencing, receiving 13 years for murder and 3 years for armed criminal action. In January, the judge sentenced her to a total of 16 years. The victim's family, including Sam Rennick, was outraged, believing Lindley and her co-conspirator deserved life imprisonment. Sam Rennick expressed his disappointment, shocked that his son's life was valued at only 13 years. He felt that Ben's death had destroyed their relationship. However, Ben Rennick's legacy lives on. The reptile community was shaken by his death and decided to honor him by naming a new snake species after him. They collected donations to support his family. The case of Elizabeth Arellano. Elizabeth Paula Arellano was born on August 16, 1987, in Fort Worth, Texas, where she spent her entire life. She grew up with her two sisters, Alessandra and Giovanna, and the three were incredibly close. After her biological father left the family when she was very young, her mother, Juanita, remarried a man named Fidel, who adopted Elizabeth and her sisters, treating them as his own. Elizabeth had a warm and loving relationship with her stepfather, who supported her in all her endeavors. She was a diligent student and dreamed of becoming a doctor one day. In high school, she met Rudolph Arellano, who was almost 8 years older than her, and the two began a romantic relationship. Although her parents were initially hesitant about their age difference, they trusted Rudolph and allowed the relationship to continue. At 16, Elizabeth married Rudolph and soon had 4 children, 3 sons, and a daughter. However, she didn't plan to give up her career aspirations to become a full-time mother. She pursued her childhood dream, graduating from medical school and working as a paramedic, with hopes of furthering her education to become a doctor. Elizabeth was a kind and pious woman, raised in a Christian tradition. She was devoted to her children and instilled in them the importance of loving and helping others. Those close to her described her as a caring and responsive person, always willing to lend a helping hand. From the outside, her marriage to Rudolph appeared to be strong and happy, but beneath the surface, it was struggling. Rudolph's jealousy and controlling behavior had been a problem for years, and over time, it became increasingly unbearable. In the spring of 2016, Elizabeth finally reached her breaking point after another jealous outburst from her husband. Taking her children with her, she moved back to her parents' house. Rudolph attempted to reconcile, but Elizabeth was exhausted from tolerating his anger and didn't want her children to witness the constant fighting. So, she found the courage to file for divorce. Shortly after, Elizabeth mysteriously disappeared. According to her friends and family, she had been in good spirits and had decided to go out with colleagues to a local club after work to take her mind off her marital problems. On Friday evening, April 15, 2016, 28-year-old Elizabeth went out with her friends to a fun spot. She had a great time dancing, but didn't drink alcohol because she had driven her car to the club and planned to drive home. After a successful night out, Elizabeth returned home well past midnight on April 16th, parking her car outside her house. She then phoned a friend she had been with at the club to let them know she had arrived home safely. However, despite saying she was home, Elizabeth never actually entered the house. The next morning, her mother Juanita was frantic with worry when she discovered Elizabeth was not at home. She knew her daughter had planned to spend the evening with friends, but she should have been back long before. It wasn't like Elizabeth to disappear without a word, and the fact that her car was parked outside only added to the mystery. Clearly, Elizabeth had returned from the club, but where was she now? When Juanita approached the car, she was shocked to find it unlocked with the key still in the ignition. Her daughter's purse and phone were on the seat, indicating that something was seriously wrong. Juanita immediately called the police to report her daughter, Elizabeth, missing. The police were hopeful they could quickly solve the case, given the leads they had. There was no sign of struggle or blood in the car, suggesting Elizabeth might still be alive. However, to move forward, they needed to piece together a detailed timeline of Elizabeth's movements that evening. To start, the police interviewed Elizabeth's friends and colleagues, who confirmed the time she left their gathering and later spoke with her when she arrived home safely. The police also found several calls and messages from Elizabeth's ex-husband, Rudolph Arellano, on her phone, which showed he had tried contacting her multiple times that night. The police went to Rudolph's house to investigate his whereabouts on the previous evening and night. Rudolph claimed he had spoken to his ex-wife, Elizabeth, the night before, and she had promised to bring their children to him for the weekend. However, she stopped answering his calls, leading him to believe she had changed her mind. The police found Rudolph's alibi suspicious. He said he had been at a local bar with a friend that evening and returned home around midnight. While his friend and other patrons confirmed he was at the bar, no one could verify where he went after leaving. Since Rudolph lived alone, there was no one to confirm he went home, making it difficult for the police to rule him out as a suspect. The police were intrigued by Rudolph's calm demeanor, given that his ex-wife was missing and they were in the process of divorce. Despite being married for many years and Elizabeth being the mother of his children, Rudolph seemed unaffected by her disappearance, which only added to the suspicions surrounding him. On the night a young mother vanished, a fisherman phoned emergency services to report a bizarre event. He was sitting alone on a bridge that spans an interstate highway, fishing, when at around 4:30 a.m., he witnessed a car drive onto the bridge, stop, and then the driver throw a large object, resembling a person, into the water. From his distance, he couldn't see details, but it seemed like something heavy and bulky was tied to the person. The darkness and strong wind on the bridge prevented him from seeing the car's make and number or hearing any sounds. Shortly after, a second witness came forward, who was walking his dog near the bridge. Although he didn't see what happened on the bridge, a distressing scream caught his attention, followed by something large falling from the bridge and a subsequent splash, then silence. Based on the witnesses' accounts, the police decided to investigate the pond near the bridge. A few hours later, divers discovered a body with a large concrete block tied to its neck with a rope. The body of Elizabeth Arellano, a missing woman, was found drowned. A passerby and a fisherman's testimonies helped locate her body, which would have likely gone undiscovered due to the strong tidal currents that prevented it from floating. An initial theory suggested that Elizabeth might have voluntarily ended her life due to family problems. However, this was quickly dismissed as it contradicted the witness account of someone throwing her into the water. Her relatives also confirmed that Elizabeth had big plans for her life and would never abandon her children and parents. The forensic medical results and a man's testimony, who heard Elizabeth's desperate screams as she was thrown off the bridge, revealed that she was still alive when a piece of concrete was tied to her neck. She subsequently suffocated to death. The brutal murder of Elizabeth, a mother of many, has left investigators baffled as to who could have committed such a heinous crime. Robbery has been ruled out as a motive, as none of her belongings were taken. Instead, it's possible that the killer may have stalked her from a club she visited or lay in wait for her at her home. Elizabeth's ex-husband, Rudolph, has denied any involvement in the crime, claiming he was at home sleeping on the night of the murder. However, investigators are not convinced, as he has no alibi and his behavior has raised suspicions. At his ex-wife's funeral, Rudolph appeared grief-stricken, saying he wished he could have died in her place. He even helped set up a charity to raise funds for her farewell ceremony, which seemed to convince his sister of his sincerity. However, when questioned again after the funeral, Rudolph's demeanor had drastically changed. as if nothing had happened. A review of CCTV footage has revealed a new lead. A car similar to Rudolph's was seen leaving Elizabeth's parents' house around 3 a.m. on the night of her murder. The neighbor remembered seeing the car parked near the deceased's house on the road. Similarly, another neighbor saw the car parked nearby. Significantly, it was discovered that the car later drove towards the bridge where the victim was thrown. This detail sparked many questions. When the investigation examined Rudolph's cell phone data for the night of the crime, the questions multiplied. The records showed that he made multiple calls, first near Elizabeth's workplace and then near his in-laws' home. Additionally, he sent several messages to his ex-wife, trying to find out when she would return, but received no response. It appears that he had been tracking her movements and eventually decided to wait for her return at her parents' house. The police gathered sufficient evidence to arrest Rudolph as the main suspect and take him in for further investigation. A crucial witness in the case was Rudolph's eldest son, who shared vital information with the authorities. When shown the rope found around his mother's neck, the boy recalled seeing it in his father's backyard, where he had played with it earlier. Additionally, the boy identified a piece of concrete from their garden, which had appeared after the fence was replaced. Significantly, small fragments of this concrete were discovered in the trunk of Rudolph's car. The investigation revealed that Rudolph had waited for his ex-wife at her parents' home, abducted her, and prevented her from entering the house. Rudolph Arellano kidnapped his ex-wife by forcing her into his car, where he had already prepared rope and concrete in the trunk. He then drove to a bridge, intending to kill her without being noticed. However, his plan was foiled when her body was later recovered from a lake. Arellano was arrested 10 days later, but initially denied any involvement in the crime, claiming he was at home on the night of the murder. Despite the overwhelming evidence and eyewitness testimony against him, Arellano maintained his innocence. However, faced with the possibility of the death penalty, he took his lawyer's advice and confessed to the crime. He cooperated with the investigation in hopes of reducing his sentence. It wasn't until January 2019 that Arellano pleaded guilty in court and provided a detailed account of how he kidnapped and murdered his ex-wife, the mother of their 4 children. The courtroom drama was intense, with Juanita, one of his daughters, fainting upon hearing his confession. His other daughters, Alessandra and Giovanna, were devastated, calling their sister's killer a monster. Rudolph showed no remorse or guilt for his actions, speaking about the murder in a cold and detached manner. He did not apologize or provide a motive for the crime. As a result, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Despite considering the sentence too lenient, Elizabeth's family chose to forgive Rudolph, as they did not want to be consumed by hatred. Her parents and sisters took on the responsibility of raising Elizabeth's children.